Prison. For most people, the word itself is terrifying. Cold concrete walls, steel doors that slam shut, and a world where respect is earned through violence. It's supposed to be the end of the line, the one place where the most dangerous criminals can be controlled. But what happens when the killers locked inside are more dangerous behind bars than they ever were on the streets? Freddie Eugene Owen proved that point almost immediately. Less than 12 hours after being processed into the prison system, before guards had even memorized his name, Owen made his move. Another inmate was dead. It was a chilling reminder that some men don't need time to adjust to prison. They were born to dominate it. And then there was Robert Gleason. Unlike Owen, Gleason didn't strike right away, but when he did, he made sure the world understood exactly who he was. Standing in court, with no trace of remorse, he told the judge and jury, "If you don't give me the death penalty, I will kill again." It wasn't an empty threat. He meant it. These are the men who turned prison into their own killing ground. Two inmates, two very different paths, but the same terrifying outcome. Their stories force us to ask a haunting question. If a prison can't contain the violence of men like this, what can?
To death in the 1997 murder of Greenville gas station clerk Irene Graves. A large part of his conviction hinges on sworn testimony from his co-defendant, Stephen Golden. Yesterday, Owen's lawyers filed an emergency motion after Golden says he lied to investigators. Golden now claims Owens was not at the gas station when the murder took place, contradicting years of testimony. Owen's lawyers say the Supreme Court denied their motion, citing Golden's contradictory statements and lack of evidence needed to overturn the sentence. His lawyers still want the state to step in and to stop today's execution. He announced until minutes before the execution is scheduled. And we have crews heading to Columbia, South Carolina today to bring you live updates ahead of the planned execution.
On February 16, 1999, Freddy Owens killed a fellow prisoner while he was in prison. This was less than 12 after he was remanded in prison. Freddie Eugene Owens committed another murder. Inside a cramped cell in Greenville County Jail, surrounded by 10 other inmates, Owens snapped. The man he attacked wasn't another convicted killer. His name was Christopher Brian Lee, a 28-year-old serving just 90 days for a traffic offense. He never made it out alive. That night, something inside Owens unraveled. Lee, according to Owens, had taunted him, boasted that a relative sat on the jury that sealed his fate. Whether it was true or not didn't matter. In a sudden explosion of violence, Owens beat him, stabbed him in the throat and eye with a ballpoint pen, and strangled him with a bedsheet. Then, as if rage hadn't run its course, he used a lighter to burn Lee's eyes and hair. He forced a pen into the man's nostril and pinched the other shut, suffocating him. The guards found Lee lifeless. And Owens? He confessed to everything the very next day, in open court. What kind of man does that within hours of being condemned to die? This is not just a story about a brutal robbery gone wrong. It's about a troubled life, a prison murder, a death sentence delayed again and again. It's about faith, controversy, and ultimately, a state's decision to end it all. While I don't support the death penalty, some people really deserve to be put to death. The scene described above looks like something you will see in a movie, but this time it is real. He killed his cellmate less than 12 hours he arrived the prison, and in the worst way possible. This is the final story of Freddie Eugene Owens. We will be talking about his crimes, last meal and last words before being executed. And it starts the moment his world was supposed to end, but didn't. Welcome to our channel. Here we share stories about death row inmates, the choices they made that led them to this very moment. We appreciate you for helping us to grow our channel. Your support means a lot to us. Kindly like, comment, and subscribe. Freddie Eugene Owens was born on March 18, 1978, in South Carolina, into a world already cracking at the edges. His mother was just 18 years old, barely an adult herself, when she gave birth to him. From the start, Freddie's life was shaped by instability, chaos, and trauma. At just 5 years old, the state removed him from his home and placed him in foster care, citing abuse and neglect from his own family. But even state protection couldn't save him from pain. The foster system brought its own brand of dysfunction. Freddie bounced between households and eventually was returned to his biological mother, who had since separated from Owens's biological father, a violent man who beat both his wife and his children. But safety didn't come with this reunion. Owens's stepfather, the man who was supposed to restore some normalcy, also turned out to be abusive, this time directing the violence at Owens's mother. Freddie grew up watching women in his life being brutalized. At just 7 years old, he witnessed something no child should ever see: his grandmother shooting a man. That image was seared into his young mind. Violence wasn't just something that happened around him. It was a part of survival. As the years passed, the signs of deep psychological scars began to show. Freddie struggled with authority, lashed out in anger, and couldn't trust people. Eventually, he was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, a condition often linked with childhood trauma, neglect, and abuse. He was labeled a danger before he ever had a chance to become anything else. By the time he reached 19 years old, Freddy Owens was already well on his way to self-destruction. He wasn't just a troubled teen. He was a young man carrying a lifetime of pain and violence on his shoulders, with no tools to manage it except rage. And then came November 1st, 1997, the night that would define the rest of his life. November 1st, 1997, Greenville, South Carolina. The night air was cold, the kind of chill that sinks into your bones and stays there. Somewhere in the city, Freddie Eugene Owens, just 19 years old, was getting ready to commit a crime that would change 4 lives and destroy one. He wasn't alone. With him were 3 others: Lester Young, Nakio Vance, and Stephen Andrew Golden. Their plan was simple. 2 pairs would split up and rob separate locations. Owens and Golden took one store. Young and Vance went another way. It was late when Owens and Golden walked into a local convenience store. Their faces were covered, Golden in a stocking mask, Owens in a ski mask. They moved quickly, with purpose, like they had done this before, or at least like they thought they could. Behind the counter stood Irene Granger Graves, a 41-year-old single mother. She was just trying to finish another shift, maybe counting down the hours until she could get home to her 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter, who were probably already asleep. Owens pointed a gun at her. He demanded she open the store safe. But Irene didn't move fast enough, or maybe she didn't know the combination. Maybe she was scared. Maybe she was trying to think of a way out. We'll never know. What we do know is this: she couldn't open the safe. And that's when Owens made a decision, one that couldn't be undone. According to Stephen Golden's later testimony, when the safe wouldn't open, Owens didn't wait. He raised the gun and shot Irene once in the head. She died instantly. There was no shouting, no warning, no second chance. Just a bullet, and then silence. Afterward, Owens and Golden grabbed what they could from the register, $37.29. That's all Irene's life was worth to them in that moment. They ran. Later that night, Owens told the others exactly what he had done, that he shot the woman in the store. No sign of guilt. No hesitation. Just the casual confession of a teenager who had just taken a mother from her children. Irene Graves never got to go home that night. Her children would wake up to a world without her, left only with memories and questions that would never have answers. And for Owens, this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. 10 days later, November 11th, 1997, Freddie Eugene Owens was arrested for the murder of Irene Graves. He didn't resist. But he didn't confess either. He said he didn't shoot anyone, that it wasn't him. Still, the evidence was stacking up. The CCTV footage from the store showed 2 masked men, Golden in a stocking mask, Owens in a ski mask. The man in the ski mask was the one who pulled the trigger. Multiple people said Owens confessed: his mother, his girlfriend, even one of the other accomplices. And Stephen Golden, the very person who went in with him, testified under oath that Owens was the one who shot Irene when she couldn't open the safe. In exchange for his testimony, Golden took a plea deal. He avoided the death penalty and was convicted of voluntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to 28 years in prison. Owens didn't take a deal. He went to trial. February 8th, 1999, Greenville County. He was charged with murder, armed robbery, criminal use of a firearm, and conspiracy. The trial lasted a week. Owens denied pulling the trigger, claimed innocence. But the jury saw the footage, heard the testimony, looked at the faces of Irene's now orphaned children. February 15, 1999, the jury returned a guilty verdict on all counts. A death penalty hearing was scheduled for 2 days later. But Owens didn't wait for that. Because hours after being convicted, Freddie Owens killed again. The victim was 28-year-old Christopher Brian Lee, in jail on a 90-day sentence for a traffic violation. A man who had nothing to do with Owens or the robbery. Just a cellmate. One of 10 others sharing the space. What triggered it? Owens claimed Lee mocked him, bragged that his cousin was on the jury that convicted him, taunted him about getting the death penalty. That's all it took. In a fit of rage, Owens attacked. He punched Lee, stabbed his eye and throat with a ballpoint pen, and strangled him with a sheet. Then he went further, burning Lee's face and eyes with a lighter, shoving a pen into his nostril to suffocate him. The assault was relentless and sadistic. Lee died in that cell, just a few feet away from the others. And when Owens stood before the judge the next day for sentencing, he confessed in full detail, right there in open court. He didn't show remorse. He said he was falsely convicted and had nothing left to lose. The courtroom was stunned. The prosecution argued he was a menace, a man with no regard for human life. Not in a store, not in a prison. Irene Graves' children, they said, lost a mother. Christopher Lee's family lost a son. That same day, Owens was sentenced to death. But this was only the beginning of a long, drawn-out legal battle. And through it all, Owens would continue to fight, in court, on appeal, in prison, and eventually on death row. In the cold, locked world of South Carolina's death row, Freddie Eugene Owens spent over 2 decades waiting for the state to carry out his execution. But those years weren't quiet. While the courts battled over the legality of his sentence, Owens underwent a transformation. It began inside his prison cell, cut off from the outside world, surrounded by steel bars and the slow passing of time. In 2015, Owens converted to Islam. He adopted a new name, Khalil Divine Black Son Allah. To the court, to the state, he remained Freddie Owens. But inside, to himself, he was someone reborn. He began writing essays and poetry, often reflecting on his past and his beliefs. He took a deep interest in African history, discussing with his legal team everything from the ancient University of Timbuktu to the legacy of Queen Amenirinas. He studied Arabic, learning to read and write the language. But most of all, he embraced the teachings of Islam fully. As his final death warrant approached in 2024, the state of South Carolina gave Owens a choice: death by electric chair, lethal injection, or the newly authorized firing squad. But for a man who now adhered to Islamic doctrine, that choice presented a spiritual conflict. Islam forbids suicide, and to Owens, choosing the manner of his own death felt dangerously close to exactly that. In his view, to select his method of execution would be to accept and participate in his own killing. Owens refused. He could not, in good conscience, make the decision. So instead, he did something rarely seen in modern capital cases. He wrote to his legal representative and asked them to choose for him. His lawyers would later confirm that this wasn't a delay tactic. It was an act of religious conviction. He had placed his fate in the hands of others, not out of fear, but out of faith. Even as his execution drew closer, Owens's team submitted emergency motions. One came just 48 hours before his scheduled death, when his former accomplice, Stephen Golden, issued a new sworn statement, claiming he had falsely identified Owens as the shooter. Golden now alleged the real killer was someone else, a man he feared so deeply that he remained unnamed even decades later. But the South Carolina Supreme Court dismissed the motion. They noted Owens had confessed multiple times, to police, to his mother, his girlfriend, even in open court. The judges ruled that Golden's retraction was not credible. The execution would proceed. On the morning of his execution, Owens remained in the death watch cell at Broad River Correctional Institution. Having converted to Islam in 2015, he adhered strictly to its teachings. When presented with the choice of execution method, lethal injection, electric chair, or firing squad, Owens declined to choose, citing his religious belief that selecting a method would equate to suicide. Instead, he entrusted the decision to his attorney, who selected lethal injection on his behalf. At midday, Owens was served his requested final meal: 2 cheeseburgers, French fries, a well-done ribeye steak, 6 chicken wings, 2 strawberry sodas, and a slice of apple pie. He consumed the meal in solitude, without comment. As the evening approached, Owens spent time in prayer, accompanied by a Muslim spiritual advisor. He did not request any family visits. At 6:36 p.m., the execution process commenced with the administration of a single dose of pentobarbital. Owens, strapped to the gurney, turned to his attorney and softly said, "Bye." She responded in kind. Witnesses observed that Owens closed his eyes and took several deep breaths. His breathing became shallow, and slight facial twitches were noted for a few minutes before ceasing. At 6:54 p.m., a medical professional entered the chamber, checked for vital signs, and pronounced Owens dead at 6:55 p.m. Family members of both victims, Irene Graves and Christopher Lee, were present during the execution. They watched intently as the sentence was carried out. Owens' execution marked South Carolina's first in 13 years, concluding a case that had spanned nearly 3 decades and stirred debates over justice, redemption, and the death penalty. Under the fluorescent lights of the execution chamber, time stood still. The man once known as Freddie Eugene Owens had come to the end of a long, turbulent path. One that began in chaos, passed through a prison cell of spiritual reckoning, and ended in silence on a gurney. He did not resist. He did not speak to the families of his victims. He had no grand final statement. His journey concluded with a quiet bye to his lawyer, his only connection to the outside world in those last moments. For some, it was closure. For others, it was far too late. On September 20th, 2024, at 6:55 p.m., the state of South Carolina officially pronounced Owens dead. He did not resist. He did not speak to the families of his victims. He had no grand final statement. His journey concluded with a quiet bye to his lawyer, his only connection to the outside world in those last moments. For some, it was closure. For others, it was far too late. On September 20th, 2024, at 6:55 p.m., the state of South Carolina officially pronounced Owens dead. But long before the chemicals took effect, the story had already etched itself into history, a grim reminder of the lives shattered, the justice pursued, and the haunting weight of final judgment. This was the last chapter of Freddie Eugene Owens, and the end of a case that never stopped echoing. True crime matters.
He didn't fight to stay alive. He fought to be executed. And when the courts moved too slow, he turned into a killer, inside prison, just to force the state's hand. Robert Charles Gleason Jr. wasn't begging for forgiveness. He wasn't reading scriptures or claiming he found God. He told the system exactly what he wanted. If you don't kill me, I'll keep killing. He meant every word. In 2009, Gleason strangled 65-year-old cellmate Harvey Watson Jr. He strangled his cellmate after tricking him into allowing his hands to be tied by pretending it was part of an escape plot, using strips of bedsheets. He was mentally impaired and known for such antics as singing nonsensical tunes throughout the night and drinking his own urine. Gleason tired of him after about a week and tied him up, beat and strangled him on May 8, 2009, the 2-year anniversary of Jameson's murder that landed him in prison. He sat next to the corpse for 15 hours before guards even noticed. When asked why he did it, he said the man was annoying and should have never been put in a cell with him.
That he hung himself up on there, but he spit at me. So then I lit him up. I told him what was going to happen. I was waiting for one of the house guys to come by with the barrel. See, at lunchtime, they come by with the barrel for your tray. I was trying to con one of them and, hey, turn your back, I need to get something out of the barrel, but he wouldn't do it. I was going to stick him in a barrel, but rigor mortis kicked in. Couldn't do it. Do I have remorse for this? No. Am I on a suicide mission? No. My thing is, I'm not throwing this as a threat. It is what it is. If you guys give me life, sooner or later I have to go to population. I'm not Armstrong. I'll sign any kind of waiver you want beforehand, whatever's legal, saying I will not appeal this death penalty. Wash my hands with it, send me to Sussex. But if I get life, I'll end up in population sooner or later. Someone's gonna get it. Ain't gonna be an inmate. I don't give a rat's ass if a fucking nun went by. I ain't gonna do it half-ass like Lamont Douglas or the other clowns did. You know, you guys take that off. Wallen's Ridge could have prevented a death. My fault. It's my fault. The only remorse I have, my kids got to deal with their father being a scumbag. But since I got messed with, the only way to prevent me from fucking taking someone else out is to get the death penalty. Do I deserve the death penalty? Damn right.
Still no execution. He shouted, "I wants to be executed." So in 2010, Gleason murdered again. This time, the victim was 26-year-old Aaron Cooper. 2 murders, both in prison, both while he was already serving life without parole. But Gleason had a rule. He told the press, "I only kill criminals like me, not innocent people. Never have, never will." But does that make it justice? Or just a serial killer hiding behind his own code? Some wondered if Gleason was mentally stable. Others said this wasn't insanity. This was suicide by system. He could have killed himself, but he didn't. He said he wanted the state to do it, so his sons could see the consequences. "I wasn't there for them," he admitted, "but I can still teach them something. That actions have consequences. That this is what happens when you live like I did. No appeals. No delays." He fired his lawyers, rejected lethal injection, and chose the electric chair. Imagine, the electric chair is known to be painful and the most inhumane type of execution. Was this a man that was on a self-suicide mission and wanted the government to do it for him? On January 16th, 2013, Gleason became the last man executed by electrocution in Virginia, and also Virginia scraped the death penalty from the system. I think this is a victory won for those against the death penalty. He went out barefoot, happy, singing, and proud into the death chamber while witnesses watched him. Who works into a room happy when you know any minutes from now your existence will cease from the earth? He didn't want to die quietly. He wanted to make a statement, even if it meant burning for it. This is the story of Robert Gleason, who forced the state to give him the death penalty, and they should do it fast, because if not he will keep killing to force the state hands. Is this character from a movie? God's wonder. Welcome to our channel, and thank you for being here. If you enjoy stories like this, told raw and deep into human psychology, then you're in the right place. Before we proceed, let us know where you're watching from so we can tailor our content to better meet your needs. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Robert Charles Gleason Jr. committed 3 murders in Virginia, each one more chilling than the last. His first victim was Michael Kent Jameson, 54, shot execution style in Amherst County in 2007. Gleason gunned him down after believing Jameson's son had cooperated with federal agents in a methamphetamine ring. He later pleaded guilty, prompting police to use a taser during his explosive outburst in court. He was sentenced to life without parole. While serving that sentence, he moved to Wallen's Ridge State Prison. There, in May 2009, he strangled a 63-year-old cellmate, Harvey Watson Jr., a mentally ill inmate serving a 100-year sentence for a past shooting spree. Gleason hog-tied, beat, and choked Watson with sheets, then waited 15 hours before guards found the body. He told the court, "I planned it to happen on the anniversary of the first murder. I had more inmates lined up if I didn't get the death penalty," making clear it was a warning he would kill again. Transferred to Red Onion State Prison, Gleason struck again on July 28, 2010. There, he befriended 26-year-old Aaron Cooper, sentenced to 30 years in prison for robbery. They passed notes in between cells. Cooper sent her mother stamps requesting she become his pen pal. In one of such letters he wrote, "I don't want you thinking I'm talking with a Satan worshipper or the boogeyman. He's just another guy locked up." On the recreation yard, he offered Cooper a religious necklace, a noose crafted from bedsheets. Cooper joked, "Don't strangle me with that." Just moments before Gleason looped it around his neck through the wire fence, strangling him until he collapsed. Guards discovered Cooper dead about 45 minutes later. Gleason laughed through the act, later mocking the staff's failed resuscitation efforts. When they discovered him, Gleason was calm. He didn't hide. He didn't lie. He confessed. He taunted. He said, "I told you I'd kill again." In court, Gleason explained. He engineered the setup to send a message to prosecutors. He did it as a favor to another inmate, planning to own someone outside prison afterward. He admitted it was premeditated, masked by trust. He'd studied Cooper, laughed with him, pulled him in with that fake necklace. He said how he pulled the cord in fits, lethal bursts, then pauses, until Cooper died. The betrayal cut deep. Cooper's mother, Kim Strickland, was devastated. Why didn't he just commit suicide? Why did it have to be my son? They should have kept him in his cell. They knew the threat. She's now suing the prison system for ignoring warnings, falsifying head counts, and letting Gleason set up the murder. Gleason didn't plead insanity or mental breakdown. He pleaded guilt in a capital murder case. He waived his appeals. He wanted that sentence. He told the court, "If you give me life, I'll go to population. Someone else, staff or inmate, will die. That's on you." That confession changed everything. 2 prison murders inside 3 years. One of them executed through a fence, using trust as a weapon. Gleason wasn't hiding behind fear or desperation. He was hunting for death. And he got it. He wasn't always a killer. Long before the murders, before the electric chair, before the press labeled him Virginia's most dangerous death row inmate, Robert Charles Gleason Jr. was just another tattooed kid trying to find his place. Born on April 10, 1970, in Lowell, Massachusetts, he didn't come from wealth or power. He came from struggle. And somewhere between childhood and the chaos of adulthood, something inside him broke. He had a gift. That's what people said. He knew how to draw. He could tattoo with precision, lines clean, colors deep. For a while, he worked as a tattoo artist in New York, living fast, working under pressure, bouncing from shop to shop. He didn't mind the noise. He loved the adrenaline. But the streets always called louder than the machines ever did. Gleason wasn't just an artist. He was also a father. He had 2 sons. And though he rarely showed emotion, those boys meant something to him. Something he didn't quite know how to protect. In one letter later, he admitted that his biggest failure was disappearing from their lives. He blamed prison. He blamed his own mistakes. He blamed the streets. But he never begged for sympathy. Not once. People asked if he was mentally ill. He didn't think so. He believed the system failed him, that he was a product of violence and betrayal, that the world didn't hand him darkness, he earned it. And now he wore it like armor. By his mid-30s, Gleason had left New York and moved down to Virginia. He got tangled in the meth trade, started making enemies, and stopped trusting anybody. He said too many people snitched. Too many played both sides. And that trust? He shot it dead one day. Just like that. He didn't see himself as crazy. He saw himself as focused, unforgiving, dangerous. The man who once etched ink into skin would soon be carving warnings into the state of Virginia, with blood. After Robert Gleason strangled Aaron Cooper in July 2010, there were no more warnings, so the court obliged him and gave him the death sentence. On September 6, 2011, just over a year after Cooper's murder, Gleason was sentenced to death. And from that moment, he was moved to Virginia's death row at Greensville Correctional Center. But unlike others who spend decades appealing, fighting, or finding God, Gleason embraced death like an old friend. He spent less than 18 months on death row. No petitions. No apologies. He fired every lawyer who tried to file appeals on his behalf. He said their attempts were a waste of time. He told the court plainly, "The only remorse I have is my sons have to live knowing their father was a scumbag." Then came the morning of January 16, 2013. Prison staff described it as surreal. Gleason wasn't shaking. He wasn't praying. He was smiling, grinning at the witnesses behind the glass like he was walking onto a stage. His tattooed arms, his shoulders relaxed. Witnesses said he walked into the death chamber like a man heading to a party, not the electric chair. They said it didn't feel real. It felt like something out of a Hollywood script. But it was real. Robert Gleason was ready. The chair was waiting. And he was smirking. The clock had started ticking. At exactly 9:08 p.m. on January 16, 2013, Robert Charles Gleason Jr. was pronounced dead by electrocution. But what unfolded in the 24 hours before that moment was as unnerving, deliberate, and unrepentant as the life he had lived. It began just after 9 p.m. on January 15th. In a small, heavily fortified cell inside Greensville Correctional Center's death row unit, Gleason sat alone. No cellmate. No yard time. No illusions. The man who had once demanded execution and murdered twice behind bars to get it now faced the full weight of his decision. He had voluntarily waived all appeals. No more legal tricks. No more interviews. This was it. His demeanor? Cold. Focused. Controlled. Prison officials later said Gleason displayed no anxiety. No fear. He had long accepted his fate and orchestrated every moment leading up to it. That night he ate. He made a request for a final meal, but told prison staff not to disclose what it was. To this day, no one outside that facility knows what Gleason chose. Not steak, not fried chicken. Maybe something ordinary. Maybe something symbolic. But the silence around that meal said more than the food ever could. Even in death, he controlled the narrative. He declined a spiritual advisor. No priest. No last rites. Robert Gleason didn't want saving. He wanted silence and satisfaction. From his cell, he made 5 final phone calls, all tightly monitored. Officials won't release who he spoke with, but it's believed at least one was to a family member, one to an old friend, and possibly one to his attorney. What was said remains private, but knowing Gleason, they weren't calls filled with apologies or tears. Throughout the day on January 16th, he remained calm with smiles on his face. He showered, shaved, dressed in the clean beige uniform assigned to the condemned. No outbursts. No screaming. No last-minute pleas. Just before sunset, the execution team conducted its final check. The electric chair, located in the death chamber a short walk from his cell, hadn't been used since 2010. Technicians tested the sponge, wires, voltage equipment. Virginia still allowed inmates to choose between lethal injection and the chair. Gleason picked the chair. He told the judge in 2011, "Lethal injection is for cowards. Give me old Sparky. It fits me." He wanted it public. He wanted it theatrical. He wanted witnesses to remember him. At 8:30 p.m., the warden came to his cell and asked the question required by protocol. "Do you have any final words you want to be recorded?" Gleason gave a nod. "I'll save it for the chair." They shackled his wrists and ankles. He walked steadily through the corridor, unflinching. No tears. No trembling. Just that eerie calm. Inside the execution chamber, the smell of disinfectant mixed with something colder, metal, electricity, maybe dread. 8 witnesses sat in silence behind a thick glass window. Members of the victims' families, prison staff, a few reporters. He was strapped into the chair at 8:55 p.m., ankles, wrists, chest, and head. A black mask was pulled over his face, with only his nose protruding. It looked medieval. It was. The final sponge was placed under the skull cap, a crucial detail to ensure the voltage would kill fast, not torture slowly. Gleason gave a sarcastic nod. Then he leaned forward slightly and gave his final words. "Well, I hope Percy ain't going to forget to wet the sponge. Put me on the highway to Jackson and call my Irish buddies. Pog Emo Thoin. God bless." The translation? Kiss my ass. Spoken in Irish Gaelic. It was a calculated insult. Defiant. Gleason had waited for this moment. Not to atone, but to provoke one last time. At 9:06 p.m., the execution order was read. At 9:07 p.m., the switch was flipped. A crackling surge tore through his body. His fists clenched violently. Smoke rose from beneath the mask. His body tensed and convulsed. Then silence. 9:08 p.m., he was declared dead. Robert Charles Gleason Jr. was the first person executed in the United States in 2013. He was the last person executed in Virginia by electric chair. The death penalty was scrapped 2021. For some, his death marked the end of a nightmare. For others, it raised chilling questions. What happens when a man doesn't fear prison or death? What happens when the system locks away a killer, but he keeps killing anyway? The room had cleared. The mask was lifted. The body wheeled out. Robert Gleason's execution was done. But what came after was not peace. It was a war of words. Within hours, the press releases dropped. Civil rights groups condemned the state. Legal observers dissected the last-minute motions. Headlines debated a brutal truth. Had Virginia honored justice, or had it become a tool in a killer's suicide plot? Gleason's case wasn't just another execution. It was a legal and ethical grenade. His own lawyers, fired months earlier, had tried to stop it anyway. They argued he was mentally unfit, that he was obsessed with death, that the state was doing exactly what he wanted. They called it state-assisted suicide. But the courts disagreed. Virginia didn't blink. In their eyes, Robert Gleason wasn't a helpless man. He was a hunter. He'd killed behind bars, not once but twice. And not in rage, but with purpose. He'd used murder as a bargaining chip, daring the system to end him. The state took the dare. To prosecutors, this wasn't about whether Gleason wanted to die. It was about whether they could afford to let him live. If they didn't execute him, who would he kill next? The message from the Department of Corrections was clear. We didn't give him what he wanted. We gave the victims what they deserved. But in the years that followed, Gleason's case wouldn't go quietly. His name kept surfacing. In courtrooms, in political debates, in academic papers dissecting the ethics of punishment. His was the case opponents of the death penalty pointed to when they said, "This is why it must end." And in Virginia, it finally did. On March 24, 2021, Governor Ralph Northam signed a bill abolishing capital punishment, making Virginia the first southern state to do so. At the signing ceremony, he said, "We've come too far to keep killing people as a form of justice." That law closed the door. Robert Gleason became the last man executed in Virginia. And in doing so, he became the final chapter of a violent era. But not everyone celebrated. Some saw the irony. A man who murdered to force his own death got exactly what he asked for, and took the entire death penalty with him. Gleason hadn't just manipulated the prison system. He'd hijacked the state's moral compass. And some argued he won. He wanted the chair. He got it. He wanted the spotlight. He kept it. He wanted control. And from his first murder to his final words, he never let go of it. The debate remains. Was executing Robert Gleason justice, or surrender? Either way, Virginia pulled the plug, for good.